NBA YoungBoy recently shocked the world when he dropped a track called I'm Bored, where he revealed something incredibly disturbing about his godmother. He rapped a line that made the entire internet pause. "My godmother want to sleep with me. I thought I was your child." This wasn't some metaphor or clever wordplay. It was a blunt, unfiltered accusation from one of the biggest artists in the world against the woman who was supposed to be his protector and guide. Her name is Kyrie Oliver, also known as Kyrie Garcia. The history of how she entered YoungBoy's life, her actions while she was part of his circle, and the details he shared about her intentions form one of the most unsettling stories in hip-hop. One that isn't getting nearly enough attention. You really need to hear this, because once you see the full timeline, the receipts, the lyrics, the tattoo, and even his own mother's reactions on Instagram, your perspective on this entire situation will shift. Let's break it down from the start. To realize why this is so heavy, you have to understand Kentrell's roots. This isn't just about a rapper and his godmother. It's about a kid who started with nothing and was essentially forgotten by the system. This was a kid who was just trying to survive, not live. Picture North Baton Rouge, Louisiana in the early 2000s. If you didn't grow up in an environment like that, it's hard to grasp the gravity of the situation. It wasn't just a rough neighborhood, it was a war zone. Young boys were being recruited into gangs before they even hit puberty. Fathers were either incarcerated or gone, and mothers were struggling just to keep the lights on. Kids like Kentrell were falling through every crack of a system that had already written them off. Kentrell Deshaun Gaulden was born on October 20th, 1999. His father, Jeffrey Tate, was sentenced to 55 years in prison for armed robbery and attempted murder. Think about that, 55 years. From the moment Kentrell entered this world, his father was gone. This wasn't just a case of an absent parent. The man was literally behind bars for half a century, so from day one there was no father figure in his life. His mother, Shirhonda Gaulden, was incredibly young and still trying to navigate her own life while raising a child in one of the most dangerous cities in America. I'm not here to bash Shirhonda, especially since we'll get into her role in all of this later. And believe me, she had some things to say that completely shook the internet. In reality, Shirhonda wasn't able to be Kentrell's primary caretaker during his childhood. That responsibility fell to someone else, his grandmother, Alice Gaulden. This is where the story truly becomes deep. Alice was the one person on this earth who gave Kentrell unconditional love. Born in 1953, she was already in her mid-40s when he was born, living on 38th Street in a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than ice cream trucks. This woman stepped up and raised her grandson when no one else could. YoungBoy has said in interviews, "My grandma was my everything," and you can hear the truth in his voice. Those weren't just words. It was a young man acknowledging that this one person stood between him and total abandonment. Alice's house became his sanctuary. While the streets outside were swallowing up young men left and right, her home was the only place he felt safe. She cooked for him, helped him with his homework, and disciplined him. But most importantly, she made him feel like he mattered in a world that told him every day that he didn't. However, Alice was facing her own struggles as well. She was raising a child on a fixed income while watching her grandson carry the trauma of his father's absence and his mother's inconsistent presence. She was doing everything she could to protect this boy from the very streets that had already claimed so many others in their community. And she was getting older. Her health was already in decline. Then, in July 2010, Alice Gaulden passed away from heart failure at just 57 years old. Kentrell was only 10. Let that sink in for a moment. At 10 years old, the only person who had ever given him unconditional love was gone. Just like that. Wednesday, July 28, 2010, became the day everything changed for him. The woman who cared for him and made him feel like he belonged in a world that treated him like a nobody was gone forever. When she died, I ain't never felt that feeling again, YoungBoy later admitted in interviews, referring to the feeling of being truly loved. He wasn't being dramatic, he meant every word. Even now, as a grown man with millions of dollars and a global fan base, he still maintains that the last time he felt genuinely loved was when his grandmother was alive. That statement tells you everything you need to know about the emotional void left behind after her passing. He loved her so much that years later, when his wife Jane Michelle gave birth to their first daughter, he named her Alice in her honor. To this day, her portrait still hangs above his fireplace. That bond didn't end when she died. It simply became a wound that never truly healed. After Alice passed, Kentrell was sent to a group home. But that wasn't a refuge. It was just another version of hell. He has since spoken out about being beaten there for no reason at all. Other boys were putting their hands on him and he would just look up, confused, asking, "Why are you hitting me, bro?" He went from losing the only source of love he ever knew to being abused by strangers in an institution meant to protect him. This was a child in a complete state of crisis. No father, a mother who couldn't be there consistently, a deceased grandmother, and the streets of Baton Rouge calling his name every day while he suffered in a group home. Even as a toddler, he had broken his neck wrestling and had to wear a head brace that left permanent scars on his forehead. This kid was literally scarred from birth, both inside and out. This is the vulnerable child Kyrie Oliver walked into the life of. Keep that context in mind, because it matters more than anything else in this story. Here is where Kyrie enters the picture. Kyrie Oliver, who later went by Kyrie Garcia, was a 24-year-old counselor working with the AmeriCorps program. not the Marine Corps, as some have mistakenly said. She was specifically assigned to Capital Middle School in Baton Rouge. Her job was to work with at-risk youth, kids struggling academically or showing early signs that they might not graduate high school. According to Kyrie's own interview with KSL News in Utah, she was placed at Capital Middle to intervene with students in danger of dropping out. She stated clearly, "We would get placed with kids that had early warning indicators that they wouldn't graduate from high school." At the time, a 6th grader named Kentrell Galden was one of those students. He was only 11 or 12 years old at the time. According to Kyrie, he wasn't even on anyone's official list because, in her words, he was past all the targets. This meant the system had already written him off. Teachers saw him as just another statistic, another kid destined to drop out, end up in prison, or worse. But Kyrie saw something else. She connected with him because she felt he needed a little extra love. She began working with him regularly, helping with schoolwork and trying to keep him focused on a future outside of the streets. She described him as a jokester, a funny kid who would prank her roommate or pour water on people. Just a regular child hidden under layers of trauma. On the surface, this part of the story seems wholesome. As the months passed, Kyrie got to know his family and met his mother, Shirhanda. She became a fixture in his life. Eventually, according to Kyrie, Kentrell asked her to be his godmother, and she accepted. This was no longer just a professional relationship between a mentor and a student. It was now family, or at least that's what it was meant to be. Even after the AmeriCorps program ended, Kyrie stayed in Kentrell's life. She continued to guide him and was present through some of his darkest moments. But this is where the story takes a turn for the worse. The timeline begins to blur. Eventually, YoungBoy dropped out of Scotlandville Magnet High School in the 9th grade. He started getting into trouble, caught a robbery charge, and served time in juvenile detention. While behind bars, he began writing lyrics, and upon his release, his career gained momentum rapidly. By 2017, at just 17 years old, he signed a 5-album deal with Atlantic Records worth $2 million. His mixtape AI YoungBoy hit number 24 on the Billboard 200, and his single Outside Today peaked at number 31 on the Hot 100. Kentrell Galden was transforming into NBA YoungBoy, and the entire world was paying attention. Throughout this rise, Kyrie claimed she was right there, supporting him, guiding him, and watching this troubled kid from Baton Rouge become one of the biggest names in the game. When things got legally complicated, which happened frequently, Kyrie allegedly played a crucial role. The most significant instance was in September 2020, when YoungBoy faced federal weapons charges after an arrest during a music video shoot. His legal team fought for him to be released on house arrest rather than sitting in a cell. They proposed he serve that time in Utah. Why Utah? Because that's where Kyrie was living. She even testified in court as a defense witness, telling the judge she had mentored YoungBoy since he was a child and would help supervise him if the court granted his release. She positioned herself as a stabilizing force, someone he trusted who could keep him out of trouble. However, there was one detail that absolutely stunned the prosecutors. They did some digging and discovered that YoungBoy had paid Kyrie nearly $600,000 between January 4th and February 1st for what was labeled as celebrity assistance services. That's $600,000 in less than a month. In a 4-page filing, prosecutors argued that this massive payment called her suitability as a custodian into question. They claimed that challenging YoungBoy or holding him accountable would put a substantial financial pipeline for her and her family at risk. Think about that for a second. The woman who was supposed to be his godmother, his mentor, and his moral compass was receiving $600,000 from the very person she was meant to supervise. That isn't mentorship, that's a business arrangement. It raises a serious question that no one was asking loudly enough at the time. What exactly was the nature of this relationship? The prosecutors weren't buying it either. They told the court they were blindsided by Kyrie appearing as a defense witness, and believed she omitted a significant detail regarding her conflict of interest. They argued that such a massive sum of money made it impossible for her to remain objective. After all, how can you hold someone accountable when doing so means your income disappears? How can you be a true mentor when the mentee is the one signing your checks? That isn't a godmother-godson relationship. It's financial dependency. And that dependency shifted the power dynamic in a way that makes everything else in this story feel completely different. Despite the pushback, the judge ultimately granted YoungBoy's release on $1.5 million bail under strict conditions, including house arrest in Utah. His lawyer, Drew Findling, described it as the most thorough detention hearing he'd witnessed in 30 years. So, YoungBoy headed to Utah, where Kyrie was waiting regardless of the red flags raised by prosecutors or the controversy surrounding that $600,000 payment. During those years in Utah, he released some of the most successful projects of his career. The albums kept dropping and the streams kept piling up, solidifying his status as a hip-hop powerhouse from the confines of his home, with Kyrie right there in the mix. On the surface, you might see this and think she was just a dedicated mentor who had been there since he was a kid and helped him stay out of prison. It seems like a fair assumption, until you hear what YoungBoy actually had to say. In 2020, YoungBoy released a track titled "I'm Bored." Buried in the lyrics was a line that made the entire internet stop in its tracks. My godmother want to sleep with me. I thought I was your child. I thought I was your child. That second part is what's truly devastating. He isn't just exposing inappropriate feelings. He's highlighting a complete betrayal of the maternal bond they were supposed to have. He's expressing a deep sense of confusion, betrayal, and pain. He genuinely viewed this woman as family, a mother figure who was supposed to fill the void left by his grandmother's passing. Instead, she allegedly flipped the script in the most violating way imaginable. If you're familiar with NBA YoungBoy, you know he doesn't just invent stories for shock value or use complex metaphors for the sake of it. When he puts something in his music, it's coming from a place of raw reality, shaped by his actual experiences and trauma. He has been brutally honest in every track he's ever recorded, rapping about his grief and anger without any filter. So, when he told the world that his godmother wanted a physical relationship with him, fans immediately began connecting the dots. Was he talking about Kyrie? And if he was, what exactly transpired between them? The timeline itself is incredibly uncomfortable. Kyrie entered his life when he was in the 6th grade, roughly 11 or 12 years old, while she was 24. She mentored him through middle school, stayed in his life after he dropped out, was present during his rise to fame, testified for him in court, and received $600,000 from him. Then, YoungBoy drops a song claiming his godmother wanted to sleep with him. Some people tried to rationalize it, suggesting he might be talking about someone else, or that he was just exaggerating. But here's the thing. YoungBoy doesn't have any other publicly documented godmother. Kyrie is the one. She's the godmother who has done the interviews, testified in federal court, and been photographed with him since he was a child. When YoungBoy mentioned my godmother, the streets knew exactly who he was referencing. Then, Kyrie did something that made the situation even more bizarre. She got NBA YoungBoy's name tattooed on her body. Think about that for a second. His godmother had his name permanently inked onto her skin. While some fans tried to defend it as just a gesture of love from a godparent, that tattoo takes on a completely different meaning when you consider what YoungBoy said in his music. When you combine the $600,000 payments, the lyrics, the tattoo, and the fact that she's been in his life since he was a kid, it paints a deeply disturbing picture. Just when it seemed like it couldn't get any messier, YoungBoy's own mother entered the conversation. After Kyrie's interview with KSL News, where she claimed she stepped in because his mother wasn't around, Shirhanda Galden took to Instagram. She posted a message that had the entire internet talking, writing, "Where was I when other people were raising my kids?" Two sides to every story. Don't make me humble your ass. That isn't just a mother defending her parenting. That's a direct threat. Don't make me humble your ass is a very specific intentional warning. It's a way of saying, I know something you don't want the world to find out. Keep talking, and I'll expose it all. It makes you wonder, what does Shirhanda know? What is she holding back, and why was her response so aggressive? What makes this even more interesting is that YoungBoy's relationship with his mother has always been complicated. He's admitted in interviews and through his music that she wasn't always around during his childhood, acknowledging his grandmother as his primary caregiver. Since that part is public knowledge, Shirhanda couldn't really deny that others helped raise Kentrell. Her issue wasn't the fact that Kyrie claimed to be in his life. It was something else, something deeper that she hasn't fully revealed yet. Many fans and observers speculate that Shirhanda knows something about the nature of Kyrie's relationship with YoungBoy that makes her uncomfortable. A phrase like, "Don't make me humble your ass," doesn't come out of thin air. That's the language of someone sitting on damaging information. When you pair Shirhanda's warning with YoungBoy's own lyrics, the picture starts to get clearer. You have two different people, the mother and the son, both signaling that something was wrong with Kyrie's involvement. This story isn't just about NBA YoungBoy and his godmother. It's a much larger conversation about power dynamics. This is about exploitation, and it highlights how society treats male victims of inappropriate relationships with older women. Let's be completely real. If the roles were reversed, if this were a story about a 24-year-old man mentoring an 11-year-old girl becoming her godfather, staying in her life as she grew up, taking $600,000 from her, and tattooing her name on his body, the world would be in an absolute uproar. News outlets would cover it 24/7, investigations would be launched, and people would be demanding arrests. But because it's a young man, a successful rapper, and someone society expects to be tough, the situation isn't getting the serious attention it deserves. That is a major problem. In the hip-hop community, people often brush these things off or make jokes, pointing to his fame or his personal life as proof that he can handle himself. Success doesn't erase the damage done during someone's most vulnerable years. Being perceived as tough doesn't mean you can't be a victim, and gender shouldn't determine whether an action is considered wrong. The entertainment industry has a long, dark history of adults exploiting young talent. Whether it's managers stealing money or people attaching themselves to young artists just to extract whatever they can. Money, clout, access, and sometimes much worse. Young artists who come from poverty, broken homes, and environments where they were never protected are the most vulnerable targets. They are often desperate for success and love, which leads them to tolerate things they shouldn't simply because they don't know any better. They've never been shown what healthy boundaries look like. When adults are placed in positions of authority over children, whether as teachers, counselors, mentors, or godparents, there is an inherent power imbalance. That power can be used to uplift or to harm. If the allegations YoungBoy shared in his music are true, it means Kyrie exploited a position of trust in one of the most disturbing ways possible. Think about Kentrell's situation when Kyrie first entered his life. His father was serving a 55-year sentence. His mother was inconsistent, and his grandmother had just passed away. He was a broken, traumatized kid searching for love and guidance. When Kyrie stepped in to offer mentorship, he likely felt immense gratitude and a sense of debt toward her. He probably saw her as the lifeline he desperately needed. That is exactly why this dynamic is so dangerous. If a person in that position of trust develops inappropriate feelings for the child they are supposed to protect, that child is effectively trapped. How do you reject the person who helped you when you had nothing? How do you set boundaries with someone who holds so much influence over your life? How do you speak up when the person supposed to be your family wants something from you that no family member should ever seek? YoungBoy found the only way he knew how to express that through his music. My godmother wants to sleep with me. I thought I was your child. That isn't just a lyric. It's the cry of a young man who was confused, betrayed, and deeply hurt. He's pointing out that she was supposed to protect him, but instead, she crossed every boundary that should have existed. Can someone be both helpful and harmful at the same time? Absolutely, and that's what makes this situation so complex. Kyrie may have genuinely helped YoungBoy in certain ways. She might have kept him out of prison and believed in his talent when no one else did. However, if she also developed inappropriate feelings for him, especially considering she had known him since he was a child, then every good thing she did is cast in a shadow. Every act of kindness is reframed and every "I was there for you" becomes something much darker. So, where does that leave us? There are questions in this story that may never be fully answered. What is the true nature of Kyrie's feelings for YoungBoy? Did anything inappropriate actually happen? And if so, when did it begin? What exactly is Shirhanda holding over her, and why did Kyrie get his name permanently tattooed on her body? Most importantly, how has this entire situation affected YoungBoy's ability to trust people? Just look at what he said in a recent interview. "The only time I ever feel love is when I walk on stage." Think about how tragic that is. Here is one of the biggest rappers alive, with millions of fans and millions of dollars, yet the only time he feels truly loved is while performing, not with friends or family, but in front of a crowd of strangers. His grandmother gave him unconditional love, but she was taken from him when he was just 10 years old. The woman who stepped into that void, his godmother, allegedly wanted something from him that no protector should ever seek. His father has been incarcerated his entire life, and his mother wasn't consistently present. Where was this kid supposed to learn what healthy, genuine love looks like? YoungBoy's music resonates because it is uncompromisingly honest. He doesn't hide his pain or pretend that everything is fine. When he dropped that line in "I'm bored," he was sending an important message. The people who were supposed to protect him failed. The boundaries that should have been sacred were ignored, and the woman who called herself his godmother may have had motives that no godparent should ever have. Ultimately, NBA YoungBoy deserved better. He deserved adults who would protect him without expecting anything in return, mentors who maintained appropriate boundaries, and a childhood free from navigating the inappropriate feelings of someone positioned as his guardian. As fans and observers, we need to take his words seriously. When a man tells the world through his music that something was wrong, we should believe him. When a male victim speaks up about an inappropriate relationship, it deserves the same energy and urgency we would give if the genders were reversed. When adults abuse positions of power over young people, they must be held accountable. Period. NBA YoungBoy is a superstar, but he's also a young man who has endured more trauma than most people experience in a lifetime. The story of his godmother, Kyrie, serves as a cautionary tale about boundaries, power, exploitation, and the complexity of relationships that appear wholesome on the surface but are broken underneath. The real question is, are we actually listening? YoungBoy didn't whisper his truth. He didn't bury it in metaphors. He said it plainly in a song for the entire world to hear. Now it's on us to take it seriously. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Kyrie crossed the line? What do you think Shirhanda is holding back? And how do you think this entire situation has impacted YoungBoy's ability to trust those in his inner circle? Let me know your take below. Make sure you're subscribed, because we're going to keep bringing you the real stories behind the headlines. Peace.